Hey there, folks. In this series, we're building up this stocks and finance app, which happens to be another hobby of mine. And this is a tool that people also interested in stocks and finance could use to research things, compare things, make charts, lists of things. Uh, just kind of a toy project I've been thinking about. So far, we've been creating our server side of this, where we've created an Apollo GraphQL server that we have just one mutation on so far, where we can call to this quote mutation and get the latest financial data on any particular stock that we pass in. But we really want to get to this interface. So in today's episode, we are going to initialize an Expo app where we will be building our interface for this app, which we're calling Finesse. Now, why Expo? You could build this in, say, Create React App or Next.js or something else like that, Remix even. But I love using and researching stocks on my phone, so I wanted to build this in Expo so we could tackle building an iOS and Android and maybe even web app all at the same time. So if you haven't used Expo before and you're a React developer, don't worry, it is still React, still the same React ecosystem. Really, the major differences are the base components. Instead of using divs, you'd be using view and text components. And the styling system, there's a specific style sheet styling system for use in Expo that makes your styles cross-platform compatible. Most other things are the same, especially when it comes to plumbing of the app, like hooking up a GraphQL, doing data fetching, things like that. Oh, routing and navigation is different too. So in this episode, we're going to bootstrap a brand new Expo app. We'll get Apollo GraphQL Client installed and hook that up with our existing backend to do a simple query mutation for fetching a quote for a company. So let's jump in. So let's go over to the Expo site, which is expo.dev, and we'll go to the documentation page. So I'm going to go to installation. Now, Expo has changed how you install things recently. They've changed kind of how their CLI package works. So actually, I think we need to go back to here. So we want to npm install global, that's the -g, Expo CLI. So we've been using pnpm in this series, so we'll stick with that. So pnpm install global Expo CLI. Okay, awesome. Now we can run npx create Expo app, my app. But we'll give this our own name. Now, let's see, is there a... I want to make sure that we do the Typescript version. So let's make sure that we do that here. Here's example project with Typescript. Here we go. So whenever you're doing a Typescript app, we want to be sure and do with Typescript. So we've got create React Native app. So we've installed the CLI. Next up, we need to create the project. Okay, so let's go to our terminal here, and we'll put in npx create React Native app. The template will be with Typescript, and we'll call this finesse-app. Something went wrong downloading and extracting the project files. Wonderful. Not quite what we wanted. That's odd. Let me do npm and install this globally real fast. and just make sure that it's not an issue with p-npm. Wow, p-npm really is faster than npm, isn't it? Okay, let's try this out. Didn't think this was going to be the issue we'd have today. Okay, it looks like at some point our finesse app was created. So I'm going to delete that real fast, and we will try this again. Okay, so it looks like it's getting a little further here. So for some reason, the global install using p-npm didn't quite work with either npx or installing this. I'm not really sure. So I would recommend sticking to the docs here just on npm global install of Expo. All right, so let's open this up in VS Code. So we'll do finesse app in our code application. So I'm going to start using the terminal now here in VS Code. And this is using npm, so we'll start on npm today, and we'll probably move this to p-npm in a future video. So let's just open up our package.json, and let's run our start command and see this happening. So I'm going to start this up, and then I'm going to hit W for web. Now, it says that we need to install, it looks like you're trying to use web support, but don't have the required dependencies installed. So we need to install this command first. So I'm going to Control-C out of this and install expo/webpack-config. Now, in case you're not familiar with how Expo runs, whenever you start up Expo, you can choose to either run it in Android, iOS, web, or 2 or 3, all at the same time. And as you make changes, it will change it in all of them. It's pretty magical. But we're going to start on the web. So we've installed the required dependency. Let's try starting this again. Doesn't like the port 19,000 today. I'll hit W to open on web. And while it did open my web browser, it did not open the tab. Digital envelope routines unsupported. Okay, I have gotten this before. Do I remember what this was? Not particularly. Okay, digital envelope routines unsupported. That's going to be a quick Google. I have, yes. I'm not sure why this is needed, but I have seen this before, needing to use OpenSSL legacy provider. So while I don't like this, we're going to use this for now and see if this fixes our issues so we can continue on. And actually, I'm going to start using Yarn Web so I don't have to hit W every time. That'll just go ahead and start us up in web mode. So let's do not Yarn Web, npm run web. Okay, awesome. So that opened up my browser. So it was this OpenSSL legacy provider flag that we needed to set. And if you put that before your command, really whether you're running something in the terminal or here in the script section, then that will pass in the option or use this environment variable value for whatever command you're running. So we're going to set this for now. That's probably something I'm going to research offline to see how we can not have to use that. So if I open up the tab here, we can see that we are now running an Expo app. So let me go into app.tsx here so we can see that this did initialize a Typescript project, which is what we wanted, so that's great. So we have open up app.tsx to start working on your app. So let's say hello finesse. I'm going to save that, and we've got hot reloading, which is fabulous. So this is a great starting point. Now, before I break some things, I'm going to go ahead and commit this. Actually, it created a first commit for me. So let's set up web, set up Expo for web, and commit that away. Okay, so as we can see here, a quick little tour. Instead of what you may see as divs, like I mentioned before, we're using views in React Native instead of divs. And passing in style, we pass in styles from this stylesheet.create function that React Native also provides us. It looks like CSS. It's heavily based on CSS, but it's written in objects instead of text. And we can see that we're using Flexbox. Everything in React Native is based upon Flexbox. And then when we need to display text, instead of using a view, then we use a text component to display our text. So you can see it's not too far away from what you may be used to on React for web, and you end up getting iOS, Android, and web compatibility. So it's pretty amazing. So let's move on to adding in our Apollo GraphQL client so that we can query our backend server here that and grab some stock information. So I'm going to go to the Apollo website and go to Developers and Docs. And we want to go all the way down to Apollo Client React. And we will find their Getting Started page. Here we go. So we're going to install, we will be using NPM today, since that's what Expo liked today. So we'll use npm install Apollo Client and GraphQL. So we will bring that in. I have this terminal running. I'm going to Control C out of that. So npm install Apollo Client and GraphQL. And those are, looks like the only two dependencies we'll need, at least for now. Next up, we will be initializing our Apollo client. So let's copy this in. I'll restart my server here. And this is the top level app component. So we'll go ahead and put in the Apollo client in here. So let's bring in our imports. And we'll bring in our Apollo client initialization. Now, instead of doing this URL pointing to Heroku, we can point our Apollo client to our backend server. So I'm going to go over to my backend server here. This is at localhost port 4000. So I'm going to bring that into here. There we go. Okay, let's see what else we have. Now we can use the client to query. That's nice. But let's connect it up in our React application. So part of Apollo client is this Apollo provider, which you would put at the very top level root of your app. that allows you to access the client anywhere throughout the app. So we'll bring in Apollo Provider here. Apollo Provider. And can we import that? Oh, that was already imported. And then pass in our client. And there we go. No red squigglies. With that, we can then use useQuery in any components within our app. So I'm going to, let's go ahead and save this. We'll let this refresh over here, but nothing changes because we're not actually using anything GraphQL yet. So I'm going to create a new file, and we'll create I'm going to say a screens directory, and then say a dashboard screen. So we'll say const dashboard is a React import React from React. This is a React function component. And we will return some text from React Native, and we'll just say that this is dashboard. Just want to see this work. So we'll export default dashboard. Okay, so let's import our dashboard component here. Save this file, and now we have dashboard. So this is correctly importing this other component here. Now let's use useQuery here in the dashboard component to be able to query our server. So let's see if we can just say use query, and we can automatically import that from Apollo Client. And then we'll use our GQL template literal or template string. What is JavaScript template string? Yes, template literal or template string. Okay, that's why I'm confused. It's called both. Template literal or template string. This will allow us to write a GraphQL query as text here. And if I may or may not have it installed, but there's a nice little GraphQL extension that allows us to have nice coloring here in our VS Code. So let's say, let's bring in our query from our backend. So we have, actually this is a mutation, it's not a query. So let's copy this in. And instead of use query, we're going to say use mutation. Okay, so we've got mutation, symbol string, quote, takes a symbol, we're passing that in. Alrighty. So mutation returns actually an array. So this is going to be an array of two items. The first item is a function that allows us to run the mutation. So I'm going to call this getQuote. And then the second item is an object that returns to us if we've got data yet, if this is loading, or if there's any sort of error state that we have. So let's go down to our view here, and let's say that we wanted, we're not going to really be styling things today, we're just going to get some functionality in here. So let's say we wanted a text input. Now in React Native, instead of just making an input tag, what we'll do is instead we'll use the text input component that's provided by React Native. And as with most input components, we can go ahead and utilize useState to track the value here. So let's say we wanted symbol and setSymbol to be our state, and we're going to start that with an empty string. So our value is symbol, and on change text, which is a nice callback function that they have here. We don't have to go through event.target.value or anything like that. Just say on change text, we will run set symbol. So now we're tracking our symbol value here in this text input. Now let's add a button from React Native also that says get quote. And on the press, not click, of this button, we will run our get quote function. Okay, let's see here. It's saying that children does not exist. Am I crazy that React Native doesn't have children? Does it have a label on it or something? Okay, title. Okay, button has a title. Title, get quote. Awesome. And then this text, let's add in whatever our response is here. Hey, Dr. Mohammed. So our response is going to be this data object. And for now, let's go ahead and just stringify our data object and put it here in our view. So I've saved this. We have this lovely interface where we've got a text field we can barely see. We've got this get quote button, and then there's this text area that we have here too. So if we've hooked everything up correctly, I should be able to put a stock symbol in here, stock ticker, hit this button, and get some sort of JSON response back. So I'm going to type in AAPL. By the way, the fact that I can type that in means our set state and value and on-change text is all working appropriately, so that's good. So let me hit get quote. Nada. Okay, nothing. So let's see what may have happened here. I have a theory. So I'm hitting get quote, and looks like, okay, variable symbol of required type string was not provided. Perfect. So let's say that instead of just stringifying data, let's stringify either error or data, because I'd like to see the responses of both of those outputs. So let's just see Apple, lots of things. So symbol was not provided. So what this means is whenever we run get quote, we need to pass in as a variable this symbol variable that we've set in our mutation. So get quote is a function, and it takes an object. One of the keys on that object is variables. So we can pass in our symbol from our text input. So let's try this again. APL, get quote, and here we go. We've got a very long string of JSON text here. So here's our return value from our mutation. So we can see quote. Quote comes from the name of the mutation here, and then all of the different values. So we've got our symbol, company name, change percent, last price, previous close, PE ratio, and then you can see type name. Type name wasn't actually a field that we requested on our mutation, but it's automatically added by Apollo Client, particularly for caching. This helps Apollo Client know the type that this object is, and then it's able to cache things locally based upon this type. Probably get into that more in a future video. But that is a very bare bones setup of getting an Expo app initialized. We got Apollo client initialized with Apollo provider. And then in a sub view, we're able to use either the useMutation hook or use query if you're running a query, which we're not, and pass in variables, get back data, see if we have errors, things like that. Now, of course, this is not very pretty, and it's pretty far away from our sketched out design here. But today we're really just focusing on getting this Apollo set up, and then in a future video we'll get to the stylizing of all this and handling of state here in our app. So thanks for tuning in. That's how you get an Expo app up and running with Expo and Apollo, and hope you keep watching the series. I'll see you in the next one.